Hey everybody, my name is Paul Esden Jr., aka Boy Green. I'm the New York Jets digital reporter for Heavy.com, and welcome wherever you're watching. We're streaming right now on Heavy on Jets to over 17,000 of you crazy Jet fans out there. YouTube.com/BoyGreen25, and of course on Twitter. And we're here for a very special guest conversation. I'm glad you guys could stop by. So let's welcome two, not just one, but two wonderful guests. We'll go piece by piece here. First off, the legend himself, Solomon Wilcots. You know him, a longtime NFLer, and of course, wonderful broadcaster as well. And he is also the host on Sirius XM NFL Radio. And let's bring him in. So, Solomon, how are you, pal?
I'm doing great, and thanks for having me on with you today.
Of course. And you know what, Solomon? We could just do with you, but you know what? We need a little extra juice. We need a little extra chutzpah. So let's bring him in, Rob Etherington, here on the program as well. Rob, thanks for gracing us with your presence.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, we've got a lot to get to here. And first off, let's get to the reason that we have all of us here together today. And like I said, we have both Solomon Wilcots here, and you guys all know him. He needs no introduction, but longtime NFLer and broadcaster and analyst. And some of you may not know who Rob Etherington is. He is the Clean Nano Medicine president and CEO. Rob, that is a very impressive title, by the way. Very nice. And first off, I guess let's start there before we get into all the football and the draft and everything that's going to be going on there. What is your company all about? And give us some of those key details.
So Clean's a nanomedicine company, which might be unfamiliar to most everybody, but
Sure.
It's a pharmaceutical company, but we're using a very new approach, nano. Nano is a Greek word, stands for super small, dwarf. Yeah. And what basically is happening is patients in a massive ALS study right now, one of the most important ever done in the ALS world. And that's the key football link we'll get to in a minute. But we have a key clinical study that is wrapping up here in the second half of this year. And we've been passionately involved in ALS. And it's a very important disease because it afflicts athletes, unfortunately. NFL players are 4 times more likely than a general male out there in the population to get ALS. It's a devastating, devastating condition. We're passionate about this disease. We spend our nights and days every day working on it. And Solomon and I have partnered up to really bring awareness to ALS and how to, accelerate drug treatment trials, and Clean's a pharmaceutical company.
Well, beautiful. And you picked a pretty great guy in Solomon Wilcots, if I may, to partner up with a pretty good guy. Let's get into a little bit of the Jets draft, and then we'll circle our conversation back to learn a little bit more about this. And Solomon, let's go right to you, my man. And again, I almost have to pinch myself that Solomon Wilcots is right here on the show. I used to watch on NFL Network and doing the broadcasting, calling games, and Sally's out there. So I just got to say, this is a pretty cool moment, Mr. Solomon Wilcots. So thank you so much, by the way, for joining us. But let's put on the GM hat here, Sally. What do you think? The Jets at 4-10, a lot of ammunition, a lot of capital to work with. If you were running the shop, what do you do, Sally?
First of all, you should know, and I appreciate those warm compliments and the great introduction. But just like Joe Douglas, the general manager of the Jets, I, too, have surrounded myself with smart people like Rob Etherington of Clean. Yes. You have to be able to do that if you want to make advancements. There is no doubt about it. But I think Joe Douglas, as you well know, he spent the entire offseason trying to leverage as many resources as possible to get that veteran wide receiver to go in the room, right, to work with this offense, particularly with a young quarterback like Zach Wilson. They tried to get Tyreek Hill. They struck out. They've been on the phones calling Seattle, trying to get to their talented wide receiver, DK Metcalf, and haven't been able to do that. They even tried to get Brandon Cooks at one point from the Houston Texans. So I still believe they're going to try to trade that 10th overall pick in the first round to try to get a veteran receiver. We're hearing Deebo Samuel, who I think would be a huge get for the New York Jets offense. And still, I think they're going to try to take a swing at DK Metcalf as well. If they cannot make a trade with that 10th overall selection, I think they'll use it to take a wide receiver. But as you know, they have the 4th overall pick on the board as well. And I do think Robert Saleh is going to try to make his defense a little better. It could be an edge rusher, one of the top guys on the board, or it could be a top cornerback, Ahmad Sauce Gardner, Derek Stingley Jr. So the Jets are armed with a lot of draft picks, as you well know, so they can go in a number of different directions.
Solomon, you are speaking my language. I like the talent that you're discussing. This makes a lot of sense. Let me ask you this on the Deebo Samuel thing, the pros and cons. There are some fans, believe it or not, there's actually a large majority that actually don't want to dip in those waters. They say with the picks you got to give up, the money you got to give up. That's a lot to give up for what those people argue. You're not a piece away. So that seems to be on that side. And the other side is, well, help Zach Wilson out. Help a brother out. Try to give this man some playmaker, something to do something with. Solomon, what say you on that argument of one way or the other? Because, of course, you could just select a wide receiver at number 10, and he'd be under team control for 5 years at pretty cheap money. Deebo's going to cost a lot of money. How do you weigh those two things?
There is no doubt that if you trade for Deebo Samuel, you're going to have to sign him to a new contract. Yeah. Other than that, it's a 1-year rental, and I don't think you want to do that. I think if you get him, you certainly want to sign him up and lock him up to a long-term deal. And that's going to take extra resources, but it's resources that the Jets have. They also have plenty of draft picks, 9 overall picks in this year's draft. They have 2 in the first round. They have 2 in the second round. And so they need to be able to use those picks. We've seen other teams, right? Whether it is Tampa Bay, whether last year it was the Rams, use those picks to get a known commodity. In the draft, we're drafting an unknown commodity. You don't quite know what the return on investment is going to be. You hope that that player is going to have high yield in their very first year. But if you're looking at the wide receiver position, the Jets don't need to look any further than what they've done in the last 2 drafts, particularly in the second round with Denzel Mims as well as Elijah Moore. Didn't get the kind of production you wanted in the first round, did you?
No.
So what that tells Joe Douglas, you might as well go with the known commodity at the wide receiver position, a veteran who's already proven they can produce in the NFL. And that's what Deebo Samuel is. And if it takes you a couple of draft picks to do that, you have plenty to spare, but I would rather use them on the known, proven veteran commodity than the rookie that you don't quite know what you're going to get, especially in that first year. I think that's the thinking, and that's why you've seen Joe Douglas work desperately to get a veteran wide receiver since the offseason began.
And Solomon, that's really it that I don't understand. People just assume, and that's a dangerous thing to do as a Jets person, that you're going to draft somebody and they're just going to be really good. Great. Yeah, sure. In theory, drafting a wide receiver and controlling him for 5 years at like $20 million sounds great. But what if he's a bust? Then you're in the same gosh darn position that you were in previously. So you're speaking to me here, Solomon.
Well, think about it. 2020, you took Denzel Mims in the second round. Good player, by the way. Was projected to be a first-round player, fell in the second round. Still hasn't produced for you. Last year, Elijah Moore, who I really do like, who I think is going to be hugely productive in the offense. He's playing with a young quarterback, with a young offense, but still didn't get anything in that first year. You could take a lot of these receivers. Justin Jefferson, you go back 2 years ago, he hit it out of the park, right, for the Minnesota Vikings. But let's take a look at 3 of the other wide receivers who were taken in the first round. CeeDee Lamb, he was okay in that first year, really popped in year number 2. Jerry Jeudy, who any of us would have taken in the first round that year, has yet to really pop. We believe he will, but now we're going on year number 3. Jalen Reagor, who the Eagles took, still a failure to launch. That just goes to show you, I just gave you some great names. Really, guys who were bona fide first-round picks at the wide receiver position, but yet haven't really taken off. Obviously, Justin Jefferson have, Jamar Chase did. But what we know, there's more guys who went in the first round who didn't pop than guys who did. What makes you think that if you draft another one this year in the first round, that he's going to explode off the launch pad year number 1? I think Zach Wilson needs productivity right now as opposed to development in that player later on.
No question about it. Again, we're speaking with Solomon Wilcots, longtime NFLer, both as a broadcaster, analyst, and a player, and, of course, Clean Nano Medicine president and CEO Rob Etherington here on the show. And again, make sure you guys like where you're watching, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, technology, people. Make sure you show your support wherever you can. Rob, let's circle back and get you in the mix, because here's the question that Jet fans are asking everywhere. Are we going to go back to the playoffs before I'm dead? It's been 11 years, for Pete's sake. I mean, let's go first to you, Rob, and then we'll circle to Solomon. When the heck are the Jets going to get back in the playoffs?
Hopefully this year.
Yeah, there you go. That's the right answer right there, Rob. Yeah. That's the right answer.
It's been a long time. I lived in New Jersey for 10 years, and
wow.
we right on the right by the Jets stadium. And anybody who lives in New Jersey pulls for the Jets all the time.
That's right. Okay.
Yeah, I'm with Rob. I do believe the Jets, because they're loaded with draft picks. I think they've done a really good job in free agency as well, adding the running backs. That's essential to this group, to this system, and this style of play that Mike LaFleur is going to deploy as an offensive coordinator, that Robert Saleh is going to deploy defensively. It's taken them a couple of years to kind of get the players they need to fit into this offense, as well as on the defensive side of the ball. I think Zach Wilson is a young quarterback with loads of talent. They've invested in the offensive line, not just last year in the draft, but this year in the offseason, in free agency. And so I think this offense could take off. You know, C.J. Uzomah was with the Cincinnati Bengals. Now he comes over to the Jets. He's going to be able to make some plays for you at the tight end position. There's no doubt in my mind. I think the wide receiving core is going to be very interesting and very important. A player like Deebo Samuel only needs to get the ball 5 yards away from the line of scrimmage and can turn 5 yards into a 50-yard explosive play. You get him and put him in the slot, have him working coming out of the backfield, it opens up the field for the other receivers on the outside. It opens up the run game within this offense, because I do believe they're that close to being highly productive. They're playing in a very tough division with, hey, look, the Buffalo Bills, they've already launched. They're halfway to Saturn right now, and the Jets are trying to catch up. And I do think the Miami Dolphins, think about it. Mike McDaniel was in San Francisco right there with Robert Saleh. It's the same offensive system, right? It's about which quarterback can really get going in the very same and similar system, and who can build it more quickly. And that's why I think Joe Douglas is highly aggressive, trying to build the offense. I do think the defense for the Jets is ready to have a special year. With that 4th overall pick, you've got to come away with a productive edge rushers. And those guys are expected to produce year one, not like the receivers who need to be nursed a little bit before they start making plays.
That's true. And Solomon, I can feel the Bengals love from across all these digital shields here. So I have to ask you, of course.
He's got a lot of Bengals love.
That's right.
You can feel it. Again, I'm a huge C.J. Uzomah guy. So again, his energy is palpable. So, yes. But could the Jets make a similar leap? You know, no one thought the Bengals were going to do what they do. Then, woo, they're in the Super Bowl. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, a lot of fun. Solomon, could you predict? Could you anticipate? Could you pontificate the Jets making a similar jump in 2022?
It would be huge pontification. That's but I will say this. I couldn't even predict last year that the Bengals would have done what they did, and that is go to a Super Bowl. I mean, coming in, if you would have told me they were going to be 8-8 and miss the playoffs by one game, I would have been like, we'll take it. That's how bad things were. Yeah. And you and I remember midway through the season, the Bengals go out to New York, and lo and behold, I watched that game. I watched the Jets just put it on the Bengals. Like the Jets can sit there now and say, Cincinnati Bengals, we beat them last year on their way to the Super Bowl. You recall that game. Yeah. They had that spectacular offense. And to me, I think that game was really just a harbinger of things to come. I think it sort of foreshadowed what that offense could be when it's really clicking. It showed us that the defense can get timely stops when they're playing and doing the things that Robert Saleh is teaching defensively. You also have another former Cincinnati Bengals player who you signed last year in free agency, and Carl Lawson, who never played a down during the 2021 season after having that season-ending knee injury. If he can get back to form this year and be healthy and give you some presence coming off the edge, I do think Robert Saleh is going to get him an edge rusher in this year's draft with that 4th overall selection. There's no doubt in my mind. And I think it'll be a productive player as well. I think that game, looking back, if you could just look back at that game last year against the Bengals, the Jets were magnificent that day. It just showed you who and what they can become. Now, remember, they also beat the Tennessee Titans, right? And some really good teams in the AFC with really good quarterbacks. So, again, I'm not going to predict playoff run. Yeah. But much more competitive than anything you saw last year from the Jets.
By the way, Solomon, you're welcome, by the way, for the Jets beating the Bengals and then getting you guys all figured out so you could go to the Super Bowl. So, I mean,
That's
it's,
right.
We just want to make sure we get a royalty check that must still be coming in the mail, perhaps.
That's right.
That's right. Okay. One more quickie, Solomon, then we'll go back to the heart of this conversation for everyone who's still joining us. I'm seeing people pouring into the comments section. You mentioned the offensive line. And it's interesting. For 14 years, the Jets did not select an offensive lineman in the first round from 2006 through 2020. Then Joe Douglas arrived, and now it's an offensive lineman in the first round every year. Mekhi Becton, Elijah Vera Tucker, and some have speculated it could be for a third year in a row. What is your philosophy on building the trenches up front? And some have said maybe that's too much investment up front. What say you, Solomon?
First of all, I've been around football for a long time.
Of course.
Since the advent of the game, since the very first time they played it in 1920, when a bunch of old guys showed up at an automobile dealership, right, in Canton, Ohio, to form what is today known as the National Football League. Touchdowns follow blocking, not the other way around. Okay, that's all I'm just telling you. For every touchdown scored, somebody had to do this. Someone had to block for the runner. Someone had to block for the thrower. And you've got to get that part of it built. Even last year, the Cincinnati Bengals, they went for the pass catcher instead of the pass blocker. As a result, their quarterback now, Joe Burrow, has been sacked over 100 times over the last 2 seasons. Not even the full 2 seasons, 27 games, right? 70 plus times all of last year through the regular season. And the postseason, we saw them come up this short from a Super Bowl win because they couldn't protect the quarterback. Jamar Chase is running wide open, but what did it matter when you couldn't block Aaron Donald? And he won a game where he was blocking. He was sacked 9 times, but yet he overcome it. What if we block him a little bit better? Even after that game, they've had to go out and spend the resources that maybe we should have spent last year in free agency, and we still could have drafted Jamar Chase. They've already signed three, a center, a guard, and a tackle on the offensive line this offseason. So you can never, I think the Super Bowl showed us that with Von Miller and Aaron Donald, right, and Leonard Floyd giving chase to Joe Burrow. You cannot have enough pass protectors for your quarterback. The worst thing that could happen is you get Zach Wilson beat up. By the time the team becomes good around him, he's just like our friend Andrew Luck. He's tapping out and saying, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. My body's up. Andrew Luck, by the time the coach got an offensive line that was really good, arguably one of the best in the NFL, the quarterback was no longer any good. His body was damaged and beat up. And that's what the Bengals cannot afford to happen. And guess who's on the clock now? The Jets cannot afford that to happen with Zach Wilson. So, no, I do think you double down and triple down on the offensive line, and then you go uber aggressive in getting the talent around the quarterback.
Again, Solomon, from your lips to God's ears, baby. I love it.
I hope he's listening.
Yeah, I hope so too. Please, and make sure we get some love there. Well, now let's naturally kind of switch gears here to a very important health topic. ALS, we kind of started the conversation with this. Let's work our way back, and Rob, we're going to get you involved here. We all know about concussions and CTE, and there's been a lot of advanced conversation about that over the last decade or so. But what exactly is ALS, and why is it in the spotlight, especially, obviously, with former NFL players, Rob?
So let's first start back in the baseball era. You mentioned Solomon mentioned rather the NFL started in the 20s. Well, in 1939, Lou Gehrig, in his 36th birthday, was diagnosed, literally on his birthday, was diagnosed with ALS. And so we call it Lou Gehrig's disease colloquially. But what ALS is amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. It's a progressive disease. It affects nerve cells in the brain. It causes a complete loss eventually of muscle control. And everything I'm doing, moving, walking, talking, eating, chewing, breathing, all of that is driven by the ability of my brain to talk to my nerves. And there's 30,000 people in this country that have ALS. Doctors diagnose 5,000 new cases a year. And let's turn to the NFL link. You mentioned the CTE piece. There was a recent JAMA article that taught us that NFL players have a 4 times higher incidence of ALS. We've now learned that with a recent paper last week, that college football players have a higher incidence of ALS and related neurodegenerative diseases. And what is that? And so we're bringing awareness to this because we think it's a concern that there needs to be better development. There needs to be more research. The NFL community has been a great supporter, but we want to bring awareness because it's important to us that there's several players with the disease that are well known. You've certainly heard of Steve Gleason, O.J. Begrance, Tim Green. They've all done great jobs of bringing awareness to the disease, but this is a disease that we want to just get awareness out there. And enter clean. What we're doing is we have a drug in late stage study now that we hope to see positive results. We don't know yet. The study's still in progress. But in the second half of this year, we will get our attention to getting the drug approved if, in fact, we have data that's positive. Wow. And what our drug is doing is addressing energy issues in the brain cells so that the brain can take care of this assault.
Well, that's very interesting. And again, with you mentioning that, is there a way for listeners, their family members, and others to get involved in this? Can they participate in any of these studies? And if so, where is somewhere they can find some more information about all this?
So the crazy thing is there was nothing that patients could do for decades, but that is changing. So let's just walk back into history for a second. From 1939, when Lou Gehrig famously got the disease, all the way to 95. So from that 55-year period, there was no drugs, none. Wow. Patients just passed away. And unfortunately, they passed away quickly, 3 to 5 years typically. In 95, we saw the first glimmer of hope because there was a drug that the agency approved, actually December 96. And then there was another drug approved a few years back. So we have 2 today, but only 2. And those 2 don't really change much the course. And so there's many studies that are now in progress. Patients need to go to, if you have a family or a loved member that's dealing with ALS, get to an ALS center of excellence. These tend to be at academic centers, like Columbia near the Jet Stadium. I was literally at Columbia University on Monday, and I went to Newark, past the Jet Stadium on the way to the airport. And at Columbia is a key ALS center of excellence. There's a number of these at many academic places in the country. And one needs to get into one of these mid or late stage clinical studies like Clean is doing, because these results enable access to new drugs. And there's a renaissance of drug discovery now underway. What we're trying to do is we're trying to see if we can get, I'm holding up actually our drug in my hand. So patients drink this orally every morning in our clinical studies. And what it's doing is the treatment's absorbed, it enters the bloodstream, it gets to the brain, and there it's driving cellular energy producing reactions that help my brain cells and yours, and especially necessary in a patient with under disease, protect themselves and to preserve function. And that's critical for a patient with ALS.
Wow, you brought props. I mean, you guys are, I got to say, I've heard of some good combinations, Robin and Batman, yin and yang, mac and cheese, salt and pepper. But Solomon and Rob, I mean, I'm waiting for the Hollywood script next year, Good Cop, Bad Cop movie coming out next year. Not sure what the title of that would be, but nonetheless, you guys, thank you so much for gracing a few minutes of your time to join us here. This is wonderful. This is magical. And again, I got to thank you guys for joining us. And some more information you guys could go find is go to the Clean Nano Medicine website located at www.clean.com. And that's clean, CLENE.com. Again, that is clean.com. Any final thoughts from you guys?
Well, I'll just say this, Clean is an example of how researchers and executives like Rob have really come together to help try to develop new treatments for ALS. He did a really wonderful job of articulating just how much this disease needs to be attacked and how many resources that are required to try to find new solutions to a very old problem. And I think it's been far too long, right? That people have been suffering from this. We in the football community, we know, all of us know someone who are dealing with ALS, or Parkinson's, and some of the other tauopathies as we know them to be. And I'm really excited about the new treatments that are coming to the marketplace. So we need to continue to push forward. And we want people to go to the website at clean.com, like the one you gave, to find out more information. Okay.
And I would just say, I went to BYU, so I'm a Zach Wilson fan. I hope that Zach does a fantastic job on, he's got a great quarterback team around him as well. So it's not just Zach, I recognize. But the point that Solomon's earlier making is that football's about blocking and tackling and quarterback throwing. So that requires a lot of energy. And for everything you and I are doing every day, we require energy in our brain. And if we don't have that energy, if we lose it in the face of a disease like ALS, then everything goes in a devastating course very fast. And again, for the NFL players out there that are at risk of ALS, we've been passionately working to solve this problem. We want to get our lead asset, CNM-Au8, hopefully as a treatment for people that are dealing with these diseases. And we're grateful for any attention that we can muster towards the cause of ALS. So thank you for letting us talk about it and draw the link to the NFL.
Well, Rob, I feel like you're trying to go for my hosting job here. All this beautiful connecting of the dots between football and all this together. I mean, it's beautiful. And quite frankly, I'm looking over my shoulder like one of those players in the NFL. Like, oh boy, we got
no. Believe me, you're far more an expert on football and Jets than me. You're fine.
You're safe. You're fine.
Leave me with ALS. That's okay. Yeah.
You can never be too careful. Rob, Solomon, thank you guys so much for taking the time. We appreciate it, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.